Nice to see you. Okay. Now wait. I'll sit down. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Davis, Executive Vice President and Provost at Baylor University. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the third On Topic with President Ken Starr conversation. It is indeed a privilege to participate in an event that brings together so many students, faculty, staff, and friends from the community. Baylor's motto is Pro Ecclesia, Pro Texana, for the church and for Texas. While our commitment to the church has not changed and will not change, the demands of a globalized 21st century require us to think about our commitment to Texas as a metaphor for a commitment to the world beyond our borders. In that vein, these on-topic conversations between our president and world-renowned experts are designed to stimulate dialogue within our community on issues vital to us all. Joining Judge Starr today is Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Justice O'Connor was the first woman to serve on the United States Supreme Court. Her accomplishments are extraordinary, particularly in light of the era in which she began her career. Sandra Day O'Connor was born in El Paso, Texas, and grew up on her family ranch, the Lazy Bee, in southeastern Arizona during the Depression. Her parents were determined that she gain an education, but the options were limited given the remote location of the ranch. So her parents sent her to live with her grandmother to attend school, and she graduated high school early at the age of 16. In 1946, she was accepted to Stanford University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in economics and then remained for law school. She completed her law degree in just 2 years, graduating near the top of her class of 102 students, right along with another future Supreme Court Justice, William Rehnquist. Justice O'Connor began her career in public service as a deputy county attorney in California. After moving to Arizona, she served as a state assistant attorney general and then in the Arizona Senate. In 1972, she became the first female in the United States to serve as a majority leader in a state senate. Shortly thereafter, she was appointed to the Arizona Court of Appeals. In 1981, she was nominated by President Reagan and confirmed by the United States Senate to serve as a justice on the United States Supreme Court. She served the court with distinction for 24 years, and her important opinions on issues of privacy, religious freedom, and discrimination continue to shape our national conversation. In 2009, President Obama awarded Justice O'Connor America's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. This award is bestowed on individuals who make especially meritorious contributions to the security or national interest of the United States, to world peace, or to cultural or other significant public or private endeavors. Since stepping down from the bench, Justice O'Connor has dedicated her time and energy to civics education in the United States. Under her leadership, the program known as iCivics was born in 2009. The purpose of iCivics is to create free and innovative educational materials so that young Americans will become knowledgeable, engaged 21st century citizens. In just 2 years, iCivics has produced 16 educational games, as well as engaging teaching materials that have been used in classrooms in all 50 states. It is the nation's most comprehensive, standards-aligned civics curriculum that is available freely on the web. In a conversation just over a year ago, Justice O'Connor challenged Baylor's Law School and School of Education to develop a model for iCivics that incorporates law students in the iCivics classroom and conducts research on the efficacy of the program. She's in Waco today and tomorrow to learn about the model we have created. We are deeply honored to welcome Justice O'Connor to our campus and our community, and we look forward to hearing her remarks. Please join me and our President Ken Starr in welcoming Justice Sandra Day O'Connor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Welcome home to Texas,
Exactly.
Justice O'Connor.
Well, this is a first for me. In all the years that I spent in the El Paso area, I never got as far as Baylor. And I'm so glad to be here. I really am. It's wonderful. And especially with your new president, Ken Starr. You could not have a bigger star on your horizon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're honored by the Justice's visit. Just a comment about what will unfold. We're going to have a conversation up here, but happily, a number of you are joining that conversation. You submitted questions before this began, and those questions have already made their way to my colleagues, and we were looking at the questions. So thank you for the thoughtfulness that went into that, and so welcome to the conversation. Just a word about what the Justice can and then cannot speak to. Even though she is a retired justice, she is still an active Article III judge. And so it would be inappropriate for me to propound any question. She knows how to say no comment. But it would come with ill grace for me to ask a question about, well, what do you think about the whatever case or the issue, even the issue generally. So you will see that while you might want to know how would she vote in a particular issue that might be pending in the Supreme Court of the United States, this is not the forum for that, and in fact, there is no forum for that at all. It's one of the glories of our system that our judges and justices are to be fiercely independent and to protect that independence, even though they're gracious enough to be in communication with us in these kinds of settings. And so would you again join me in saying welcome home to Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Dr. Davis said it well. The first woman to be appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. It was about time. We'll talk about
191
that.
Years.
I'd say that's about time.
Yeah, about time, I'd say. More or less.
And it was one of President Reagan's proudest moments. But
well, you played a hand in that, a big hand.
Well, I'm proud to have played a very small hand in that.
So if I've made a bunch of problems, he's going to have to take part of the blame.
Even though I didn't get a vote on the Supreme Court, but be that as it may.
The Attorney General at the time was William French Smith, a very nice man, and he had done legal work for Ronald Reagan years before and became our Attorney General. And the Attorney General sent Ken Starr and 2 other people out to Arizona to check my record out there and to talk to me. I wasn't told it was for a vacancy on the court, but apparently that was the deal. And so we spent a long day talking, and my husband was there.
And dear John O'Connor.
We sat in our adobe house out on the desert side of Phoenix and spent the day talking.
What happened to your adobe house?
Well, it almost got destroyed. When I was appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States, my husband and I had to move to Washington, D.C. because the court doesn't sit all around the country. They stay in Washington. So that's a long way from Phoenix, Arizona. So we had to leave the house. And it was sold to somebody, and they in turn got moved, and it was sold again. Then it was sold again. And it ended up in the hands of a bachelor who decided he'd like to tear it down and build a big place for himself, because it wasn't a big house. It was made out of sun-dried adobe. Now, I don't know, here in Waco, you probably don't have a lot of adobe houses. You have too much rain, right? But anyway, sun-dried adobe means the adobe bricks are made and they're just dried in the sun. They aren't baked or made hard. I love sun-dried adobe. Somehow it belongs to the desert, and it belongs to where we were putting it. And they ended up being made out of the Salt River bed in Tempe. And it's just such a special look and feel. So I'm very thrilled that at the end of the day, the house is still there. And we used it in the years we had it quite often to get groups together, and I'd tinker with making some chalupas or Mexican food of some kind. And we'd probably find some cold drinks people could have. And we'd sit outside on the patio by that adobe house and get acquainted with fellow legislators or other leaders in the community and try to discuss what we ought to do about certain problems. That was a time when civil discussion could lead to civic action. It didn't have to be war. And that's the big thing we have to worry about today, in my opinion.
One tool is to understand our constitutional framework, the rule of law, these great enduring values, and thus iCivics. Justice O'Connor, tell us, what's iCivics designed to do?
To teach young people how our government works and how they, as individuals, can be part of the discussion and part of what happens, and get them involved in being good citizens. And this is a big order because in Texas, I think over 50% of your students, 50.3% of your students are Hispanic today. Did you know that? And they possibly have had a more recent experience coming to this country. We have a lot of education to do, I think. And it was my hope that with iCivics we could develop some games that young people can play on a computer and learn how things work, how government works, and how they have a role in it and how they can be involved. Now, this is a big order, but it's doable because of how we operate today. Young people today, particularly middle schoolers, spend 40 hours a week on the average in front of a screen, TV and or computer. Imagine, that's a lot of time. It's more time than they spend listening to their parents, I can tell you that. It's huge, and I don't need 40 hours. I need about 1 hour to put them in front of a screen, and we'll get them in front of an iCivics program, and they'll learn something. And what we did with iCivics is to get some talented people to help us devise games that the young people play that teach them some aspect of our legal system. We got together a group of fabulous teachers of the middle school, high school part of knowledge and used them as advisors to tell us specifically what area we should focus on to teach the kids in game number 1. What about game number 2? And so on. They've given us great help. And then, because young people love to play games, we reduce what we want to teach to games, and we've kept it free. So the student, the teacher, anybody can go to the website, www.icivics.org. Now, why the I? It's just because everything's an I. You have iPads, iPods, everything. So when we were thinking of a name, we thought, well, if we want it widely used, it better be I something or other, so it became iCivics. I thought it was a pretty good
It's
name.
a great idea.
Yeah.
Great name.
And the games are fun. They are just interesting to play. You'd like it. Go on the website and check it out yourself. The games are fun. And we've used this cadre of wonderful teachers of young people to guide us in what subjects we should tackle with the games, and we followed that. And then you use, did you know there are people whose business it is to design games to be played on the internet? Did you know that? Well, I didn't, but I know it now. And there's some very talented people. So we tell them what we want to teach and on what, this is what we want to convey. And then back come some ideas for games to deal with that. And it's great to play. So go on that website and check it out.
At Waco High School this last week, a number of us participated in a class and we were observing the students, and they were role-playing. They were members of Congress or members of the Senate. They were president. They were judges or justices on the Supreme Court. And one of the comments by one of the students was, being president is hard.
Yeah.
Because some of the duties of the president came rolling through, and the president was having a very busy day on iCivics that day. Mm-hmm. What are some of the student reactions that have impressed you, Justice O'Connor?
The fact that they really like playing the games and that they will go back and do it. I tested it with a young man up in Chautauqua, New York. I like to go there for a week or so in the summers. I don't know if you've ever been. It's a lot of fun. And so at the house next door to where I was staying, there was a little boy about somewhere 10 to 12. He was staying there with his grandparents, and he was from a town in Pennsylvania. And so we met, and we were chatting, and I said, now listen, Charlie, do you have access to a computer? He said, yes, I do. I said, now tonight, go dial up www.iCivics.org and play one of the games on it, and then tell me tomorrow what you think. This was when it was brand new. And so he said, okay. And the next day, I was able to see Charlie. I couldn't wait to see him. And I finally did, and I said, well, did you play a game? Oh, yes. Well, was it fun? Oh, it really was. He said it was so good that I started after supper, and finally, about after midnight, my grandmother came in and made me put it down and go to sleep. And he said, I didn't want to. But, I mean, that was my first reaction, that it was so absorbing. He wanted to stay up all night and keep playing the games.
It's clearly fun. Do we know that the students are learning?
We do, and I leave that to some of the studies done here at Baylor. I was thrilled, frankly, that Baylor, with the help of your president here, agreed that it would help us evaluate iCivics, see how it works, see how it's best spread around the country in use, and it's been a huge help. I mean, your teachers here and your students and the people at Baylor have played a very important role in letting the producers of iCivics know whether it's effective and what needs changing and how it could do better and how we get it spread around the country. Because my goal is to get people all across this country better educated in how our government works. When we got public schools in America, it was with the argument that the framers had designed this good new form of government. It was ingenious, wonderful, but we have to teach it to all of our citizens so they know how they are part of it and how this government works. And in the early years, the reason we got public schools was to teach civics, in effect. That was why we got it. Public schools, so that young people in this country, year after year, would learn how the government works. Well, today, as I told you, states are stopping teaching it. We don't do well against some other nations in math and science, do we? Our scores are not as good. So we're focusing now as a nation on math and science and little time spent on teaching reading, but civics is just, it's not on the list. And it's getting short shrift, and a good many of the states have stopped making civics a requirement in public schools. I think that's a tragedy. error. I don't think we can ever stop teaching every generation how the government works and how they're a part of it, what they can do. That's essential. It's true. And I am thrilled that we have a core exhibit now coming from Baylor in Texas, because Texas believes in civics. I went to school in El Paso, and I got so tired of civics, I couldn't stand it. We had it every year, and it got a little tiresome. But
Do you know who Stephen F. Austin is?
that's all we heard about, him and Sam Houston. Gosh. So, but we've got some other figures to talk about these days.
That prepared you for Stanford.
Apparently so. Or else they took me despite that. I'm not sure which it was.
She did very well in Texas history. The justice cannot be involved in fundraising because she is a sitting judge. And so others, and this is not a fundraising event, this is a background comment. Different foundations have come alongside this effort because of their sharing the justice's concern about what the justice has called the collapse of civic education in the United States. Happily, that has not happened in Texas, and we're honored that she has chosen Texas, and other states are becoming involved, Florida and other states. But there's a new bill introduced in the House of Representatives, and it's a bipartisan bill, and that's very refreshing.
Unusual these days.
So we're very happy about that. And it's called, are you ready for this? The Sandra Day O'Connor Civic Learning Act. Is that a great name for a proposed bill? Now, there had been previously federal funding, but that ended up being eliminated. And so this act seeks to provide a mechanism for federal funding as part of education dollars otherwise flowing. But it's tied to testing. So that is just a key component to bear in mind, and one of the roles that we're having to play here at Baylor, happily, is to assist in terms of the evaluation and the testing, the metrics, and so forth. If this comes to pass, if this bill becomes law, what do you think that will do in terms of helping iCivics in this next phase?
You know, I really don't know. I don't put any stock in some bill in the Congress of the United States. I don't know about you, but
as I say, we'll applaud it.
I'll reserve judgment on that.
We'll applaud it if it is enacted.
And I need to explain. Now, you explained to them that I'm still a sitting judge. Well, I did retire from the Supreme Court after 25 years, but I'm still eligible to sit on the lower federal courts of appeal, or the district courts for that matter. I'll tell you a little story about that. But I have chosen, since my retirement, to sit several times each year at one or more of the federal circuit courts of appeal. And this spring, I sat, first of all, on the Fourth Circuit down in South Carolina. They are so gracious there. You ought to all go do something in South Carolina. It's amazing. Then I sat with the Third Circuit in Pennsylvania. And I'm going to sit, now not again until fall, when I'm going to sit with the First Circuit up in New York. At least it keeps my hand in, modestly, on cases in the federal court system. And you're not apt to get the kind that come to the U.S. Supreme Court. You could, but that's not typical. Anyway, that's what I've been doing.
Well, and all to good effect. And we're glad that you're still a sitting Article III judge. The Supreme Court of the United States, it's the authoritative interpreter of the Constitution of the United States. Benjamin Franklin, as he was leaving the Constitutional Convention on September 17, 1787, in response to a question about what kind of government that was being proposed for the ratification process, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. And I think iCivics is part of that effort. Reflect, if you will, on your service on the Supreme Court.
It was amazing, you can imagine, because the Supreme Court receives petitions from parties to cases already in the federal court system, coming up by way of the district court and then the federal courts of appeal who sit across the United States. And the losing party can file a petition for certiorari, or in some cases an appeal. That's a technicality I won't explain to you today. But they can apply to the Supreme Court to have the case argued and decided there. And one of the big jobs of a justice is to be part of deciding which of those petitions the court should accept and hear. The court's not obligated to take those cases. And the justices actually read every petition that's filed, and then any justice can ask that a particular petition be put on a discussion list so that the 9 members of the court go around the table and in turn talk about it and then vote on whether to take it. And the Supreme Court follows a rule of its own making that it takes the agreement of only 4 of the 9 justices to accept one of those cases that is petitioning the court. And a huge part of the job of being a justice is to read all those petitions for certiorari. We call them cert petitions for short. And we get over 10,000 a year now at the court. There was never a day in the 25 years that I didn't have cert petitions to read. And I would just make a little note for myself on each one. Am I going to vote to deny this, or is it one that we should discuss and possibly grant? And that's a big part of being a member of the court, is looking at the petitions and seeing which ones to hear. The other big part of the work is when the court accepts a petition and says, all right, we're going to consider this. The parties have to come present their case to the members of the court. They file written briefs. I don't know why they call them brief, they're long. And they're written arguments that tell you all their reasons why they think if you're the petitioner, the court should take certain action. And then you get one from the responding side as well. And the lawyer for the petitioner is then scheduled to come to the court and make an oral argument at some time during the term. And the other side gets to make an argument on the other side of the issue, the oral argument schedule at the court. And both are interesting. And other interested individuals or groups can file friend of the court briefs with the court. They're called amicus briefs, but they're allowed to file them too. And often for a single case at the court, you will get a stack of briefs that high from the parties and from friends of the court. So there is a huge amount of reading at the court. I would read all day and take things home and read until it was time to go to sleep at night, get up early in the morning and start reading again. You never run out of reading material that you need to do at the court, never. And then the oral arguments at the court are very interesting to hear, most of them. I mean, a few of them could put you to sleep, but typically they only get anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes aside to make their oral argument, and that's not a long period of time. Then the other side gets to make up their argument, and the justices get to ask questions during the argument. They don't have to submit in writing like you did, but they get orally ask the lawyers questions. And so it's an interesting time to be there. And when you are in Washington, if it's a time for oral argument, you ought to try to go to the court and sit in on one of those sessions because it's fascinating. Recently, there was a huge demand for seats on the court to hear the arguments on the health care law that President Obama encouraged to be signed. And then there was a case the following week, the last week at the court, that came from Arizona, dealing with laws regulating suspected illegal immigrants in Arizona. And that raises some very touchy legal issues that will be of much interest in Texas, because you have a long border with Mexico, as does Arizona. And so seats in the courtroom were in big demand that last week. Now the court's finished for the summer, so you can breathe a big sigh of relief. But they haven't issued the opinions yet.
You mentioned these touchy issues, some of the questions that came in, which the justice can't comment on the substance of, but affirmative action, free speech, flag burning, race relations, just a wide variety of very controversial
And criminal cases
and
of all
criminal
kinds.
cases. Without obviously even asking you to comment, which you wouldn't do anyway, just if you would describe the process inside the court in terms of the dynamics, the interpersonal dynamics.
Yes,
you
it's
know
interesting.
one another.
Yeah.
Please.
You start with the discussion of petitions for certiorari. Any petition that any one of the 9 justices wants discussed will be put on a discussion list. So that's one thing, as I've explained to you, we do. And even that discussion can be interesting. And it takes only 4 of the 9 justices to accept a case for oral argument. That's good, I think. It doesn't require a majority of the court to say, yes, we'll hear that. It allows a minority of 4 to force the full court to hear an issue, and that's a good thing, I think.
Is it, to use a term from Congress, is it okay for one justice to be lobbying another justice?
Well, you certainly could. I mean, I could go tell Bill Rehnquist, my old classmate, now, Bill, I'm listing this thing for discussion, dealing with the right to bear arms. I think you know what one I mean. Now, I really think the court ought to hear that. What do you think? Is that something you can support? I mean, you'd have discussions like that with your colleagues about cases that are listed for discussion, and I think it's appropriate to. And then some other colleague might say, well, I know it's an issue maybe we should take, but there's a defect with this one because, and then tell you what some problem is that might prevent you from ever reaching the decision if you took that particular case. I mean, that kind of out-of-court discussion takes place all the time. Just a minute, I'm going to have water.
The justice has written 2 books. I'll bet you a lot of folks in here have read at least one and perhaps both of them. But The Lazy Bee, which is her brother and her recollection of life on the Lazy Bee, and then
It's fun. If
It
you
is
haven't
fun.
read it, it's a lot of fun.
and then the Majesty of the Law, inspired by a particular, well, you might want to say what it was inspired by there at the court.
Well, we just have these wonderful engravings at the court, and we have in the courtroom carvings of some of the great lawgivers of all time around the rooms. So you're never away from messages that remind you of the importance of the work that the court does. And I think that's very special and very touching.
And one of the friezes is entitled The Majesty of the Law, which
It's the one
inspired
above the bench where we sit.
the name of the book. In that book, you note that back some time ago, under Chief Justice Taft, so going back a century, the vast majority of Supreme Court opinions, judgments, were unanimous. And how do you respond to the charge that in more modern days that the court has become much more divided and then arguably more politicized?
It's happened before. It isn't a modern court phenomenon. Look at the Franklin Roosevelt years. And kind of the end of that, and the court was severely divided many times on cases. So there are 9 members, and to get a holding of the court, you need 5. It's said that Justice William Brennan, when he was hiring law clerks, would receive him in his office, and he'd hold up his hand. 5. And the clerk applicant would say, well, Mr. Justice, you're holding your hand up for 5. May I ask why? 5, he said. That's how many votes you have to have on this court to win your case. And
The rule of 5.
The rule of 5. It's the rule of 4 to get one accepted for the court to hear. It only takes 4. To have a holding of the court on any issue of federal law takes 5. And that's what every justice strives to achieve when you're assigned to write an opinion for the court. You want to get 5, at least. You'd like to get 9, 5, and 4, but you only have to have that. And so that's a big part of your job there if you're assigned to write a case for the court. And the Chief Justice does pretty much what other justices do, but the chief has the power to assign opinions, and the other justices don't have that power. So after you've had your conferences, cases are argued, the oral arguments take place at the court. We've already read the briefs. And as I told you, they're not brief, they're long. We've read them all. We've heard the oral argument, and then you have a conference of the 9 justices and go around the table. Now, in the United States, the first speaker around the table, and nobody else is present. There's no staff. We don't make recordings of it. It is not, believe me, it's just the 9 and no little record made. All right. So, go around the table, and each one, starting with the Chief Justice and then the most senior justice around to the end, you hear each one, and they can speak as long or as briefly as they want, and they'll tell you how they plan to vote on that case. When I ended up on the Supreme Court, I went to oral arguments for the first time. I had never visited the court to hear an oral argument. I had never sat there for one until I was on the bench. And I sat there that first week of oral arguments and listened to the cases, and it's so astonishing to be up on the bench and look out there at the people who are there to watch and to listen to the lawyers argue. And they are as close to the justices as the people on the front row are to me. That's quite close. I'd be nervous if I were a lawyer, because, you're just right there with them. Anyway, then later in that week, the 9 justices get together and they sit around the conference room table and go around, and each one tells how they think the case should be decided. Okay, Smith versus Jones. And the Chief Justice starts the discussion. And he says whatever he's going to say. Well, in this case, I've thought about it a good while, and it seems to me we're really pretty much bound by the O'Connor decision back in whatever it was. And so we're going to have to affirm in this case. And I guess that's what I'd do. And he may have more to say about it. Then it goes to the most senior associate justice and on around the table until you get to the junior justice, the newest justice. And that first week when I sat on the court, the very first case where I participated in the discussion came to me 4-4. And that happened to me often. So, here is the last justice. You think your vote doesn't count. It does. When it comes to you 4-4, you're casting the deciding vote. Isn't that amazing?
And Justice Breyer served as the junior justice for 11 straight years.
Yeah, a long time.
There was such stability on the court. Let's go back. Time is evaporating to the lazy bee. As much as Texas loves to claim you as a native Texan, you are an Arizona.
I'm a product of that ranch.
of the Lazy Bee.
Yes.
And you say in the foreword to the book, by the title of the ranch, the name of the ranch, the Lazy Bee, you say that you and your siblings learned a lot out on the ranch, and now I'm quoting, "Most of all, we learned how to be responsible for the care and the nurture of all of our livestock and equipment and of the land that we used."
That's right.
Did you reflect on your experience growing up on the Lazy Bee?
It was so amazing. People today can't even imagine what it was like. The ranch we had was large. It was about 300 square miles. And we had to take care of all of it. And we had quite a few cattle who were spread out over the ranch. And we raised our own horses. We had quarter horses, and we had horses that we cared for. And you had to do everything. There wasn't a yellow pages that you could call. We didn't have telephones. You couldn't call anyone. If something broke, we had to fix it. We had to get it running. If some animal on the ranch had injured itself, we had to collect that animal some way, get it into the main ranch area, tie it in some way, and treat the injury and hope we could get it well. We had certain medicines we could dispense to the cattle in emergencies. You had to do everything at the ranch yourself. When the windmill broke down, we had to fix it, and that was a hideous job. If the car broke down, we had to fix it. There wasn't a handyman. I mean, you had to do it all. And it was with a real sense of responsibility that we lived there. And the minute we were old enough to go out in some pasture and look for some particular animal, and they're all bred to look exactly alike. So anyway, we had to be responsible for doing that, getting our horse, saddling up, going out, getting some. It was a place where early on you learned a sense of responsibility. But it was also a place that was interesting. You never knew from one day to the next what you'd be doing or what adventure you'd have or what you would see. There could be amazing things happening in the out of doors, as you know. We had plenty of wild animals that you could see and run across, and I mean, it was fun. And we didn't like jackrabbits, and we didn't like coyotes. So we didn't go any place in a car without a .22 rifle. And if the driver spotted a coyote, then the passenger had to get busy and shoot it. And you'd have to go across country, and you'd be jumping up and down over the bumps and trying to shoot some coyote in the process. I mean, it was very exciting stuff. And we had big steel-rimmed tanks with water at various points on the ranch where we needed to distribute water to the cattle in troughs where they could drink, and we'd store it in these big steel-rimmed tanks. And so that's where I'd swim. That was my swimming hole, the big steel-rimmed tank at the ranch. I remember I had a cousin who was exactly a year older than me. She was living in Corpus Christi, and we would get together every summer. She was wonderful. And my parents wanted to go into town one summer day to get the mail or do something, and we didn't want to go. We were swimming in the tank, so we said, no, you leave us here. We're not going swimming. Well, that was not the thing to say. My father went down and got his lariat rope, and he waited till one of us had to come up from underwater to get air, and he just lassoed the hand, dragged us in, said, "You're going into town." I mean, you know, you didn't have much choice. It was so funny. But
now you see why she went to law school.
Yeah, I had to learn my rights about getting ropes.
And she didn't have iCivics. Let's talk, before Dr. Davis comes to propound some questions from our audience colleagues here. Teachers and professors. At Baylor, we honor great teaching, and we honor great teachers. We have a title. You met one of the great teachers, Tommy Lou Davis, master teacher. And to us, that's summa cum laude. That's it.
Yes.
You cannot do any better.
I agree.
Now, a few years ago, you were speaking at your alma mater at Stanford, and a law professor who you had was being honored, Professor Harry Rathburn.
Yes.
And you said, and reflecting on his career, that at the end of each semester he gave a closing lecture, but it was not about law.
No.
It was something beyond law and law practice.
Right.
So tell us what that great professor said that stuck with you.
He was a fantastic man. And indeed, he is why I went to law school. I didn't wait till his end of the year talk. Somebody had told me that he was a superb professor. He was at the law school at Stanford, and I managed to find out when he was speaking one day and went to hear him. And he was so inspiring that I applied to law school. I didn't know lawyers, for heaven's sakes, out on the lazy bee. We didn't know or care about lawyers. But I heard him, and I just couldn't, I had never heard anyone so profoundly moving as he was for whatever reason. He spoke to me. I mean, I heard what he was saying, and it resonated in my bosom. And so I applied to go to law school, and they took me, to my surprise, but it was because of Harry Rathburn. And he was getting older at the time, so I only had one class from him as a professor at Stanford. But I just remember him so well, and he spoke of personal responsibility, obviously. That was his theme, that we all owe a debt to society. I shouldn't put it that way because he wouldn't, but our role in life has to be to learn everything we can and then to pass on those lessons that matter to those younger than we are or others who want to hear, and that we each have this responsibility to try to leave the world a better place if we can, to help in some way make our society better. And that spoke to me a lot. I don't know about you, but I had no burning desire to be an architect or a doctor or a this, that, or even a lawyer. But I did want to find ways that I could contribute to helping our society, our nation, our place where we live, do better and be better. And how wonderful to try to be part of a process like that, however small. How wonderful to try to do that. And so he meant everything to me in applying to law school and trying to make what I learned be helpful.
A great tribute to a great teacher. Speaking of a great teacher, would you welcome back to the podium Dr. Elizabeth Davis, our Executive Vice President, Provost, and great teacher, who is armed with your questions.
Okay.
Justice O'Connor, we had a large stack of questions that we have culled through, and so we have 4 for you before we call the afternoon to a close.
Well, you can ask him questions too. It's all right. Your president is a good question answer.
Well, and I have him here in front of everybody. I ought to take that opportunity.
Okay. You might like that.
I know.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of people want to know whether you've encountered any discrimination in your legal profession because you're a woman.
I'll tell you a story. My husband was John O'Connor. He passed away 3.5 years ago from Alzheimer's disease. And he was absolutely marvelous. He was the funniest man you've ever been around, and he could make you laugh and did every single day. So that was pretty nice. But anyway, all right, now your question was more direct than that. Come on.
Discrimination as a woman.
Yeah, okay. So John and I got engaged to be married, and I had graduated from law school. I had passed the California bar. I was ready to go to work. He was a year behind me, and we both liked to eat. That meant one of us had to work. So that was me. Stanford had notices on the bulletin board in the law school. Stanford law graduates, call us. We want to talk to you about a job. Call. They'd have a number and a name. I called 40 numbers and talked to 40 people in 40 different law firms. Not one of them would even give me an interview. I was female. Now that was 1952, but that's how it was. Can you believe that? And I was so ignorant. When I went to law school, I never asked how hard it would be to get a job as a woman. I didn't even think about it. I mean, I did everything on the ranch, and I thought there wouldn't be any problem. It really didn't occur to me. And I was astonished that I could not even get a job interview. I went to an undergraduate woman friend of mine at Stanford, whose father happened to be a partner at Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, big firm in Los Angeles. And he arranged an interview for me, and I made the trip to Los Angeles from Stanford and met with this distinguished looking man, like this, in a suit, looking wonderful, gray hair. And he looked at my resume. Oh, Miss Day, you have a fine resume here, Miss Day. But Miss Day, this firm has never hired a woman lawyer. I don't see the day when we will. I looked shocked. He said, well, our clients wouldn't stand for it. And I'm sure I crumbled up a little bit right in front of him. And he said, well, Miss Day, how well do you type? And I said, so-so. And he said, well, if you can type well enough, I might be able to get you on here as a legal secretary. And I said, well, thank you, but I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to work as a lawyer. So thanks for the interview. Goodbye. Well, that left me in kind of a pickle. I had heard that the county attorney in San Mateo County, California, just north of Stanford, had once had a woman lawyer on his staff. I wrote him a letter and asked for an appointment to see him, and he gave me an appointment. These elected officials do that. So he agreed to see me, and I went to see him. Oh, Miss Day, you have a fine resume. He said, I did have a woman here for a while, and she did a good job. I'd be willing to have another. He said, you would do a good job. I like your resume. But I get my money from the County Board of Supervisors, and I'm not funded right now. I don't have any money to hire another deputy. And he said, my face fell. So he said, well, I don't have any money, but let me walk you around the offices here. I'll at least show you what the offices are like. So we walked around. He didn't have too many people, 9 or 10 deputies, I'd say. And he said, as you can see, I don't have an empty office to put another deputy right now. So I went back to the Lazy Bee Ranch to plan for our wedding, and I wrote him a long letter. It's now in the museum out there. I told him all the things I thought I could do for him if he'd take me on, and I said in the letter, I will work for you for nothing until such time as you are in a position to pay me something. I said, it doesn't matter. I'll work for nothing. And I said, I know you don't have a vacant office, but I met your secretary, who's very nice. There's room in her office to put a second desk if she had no objection. That was my first job as a woman lawyer. No pay, and I put my desk in with the secretary. But I'll tell you what, I loved my job. It was terrific. I was on the civil side. I got to receive questions about, can I do this, or how should I handle that, from the various county officers and boards and commissions. I just loved it. It couldn't have been better. I didn't want to work on the criminal side, so I was on the civil side. And it was just super. So that's how I had to get my start. And I think I'd been there 4 or 5 months under that arrangement when the county attorney, who had taken me on under that arrangement, was appointed judge of the county. And we were all so happy for him. That was great. And my supervisor became the county attorney, and that opened up a little room, and I started getting a little pay and so forth. But it was hard.
Justice O'Connor, let me offer my personal word of thanks for paving the way for women like me to have an opportunity. I did not have to face the difficulties you did.
Well, it has improved.
Yes.
And when President Reagan put a woman on the Supreme Court after 191 years without one, I can't tell you how many doors that opened for women in this country and around the world, because the other countries were like we were. They weren't hiring women lawyers. And that made a huge difference. I don't know if President Reagan himself knew what a difference that decision made for women in this country, but it really did. So that was a big move that this man to my left was involved in. Whether he knew it or not, I don't know. But that made a sea change in the United States.
Well, and I can attest he's been a strong proponent of women in leadership throughout his career, and I appreciate that. Okay, let's fast forward about 40 or 50 years. Media has changed a lot since you were appointed to the court. How has cable, the internet, and social media impacted interest in issues the court decides?
I don't think it's changed anything. I mean, really, Supreme Court justices don't go home and listen to the evening news to decide some question before the court. In fact, if anything, it just makes you wish you didn't have to decide anything at all if we were going to have all that news coverage. You can imagine what it was like if there was the Bush-Gore election case or something. I mean, it's just absurd to think that there can be media pressure. There really can't. And the justices do not pay attention to that. You have legal issues to decide, and you read the briefs matter of the parties and all the amicus briefs. Legal research matters. You want to read the cases that have already been handed down in the past that deal with that issue of law. You want to be familiar with them and what they stand for. And you want to understand the facts of the case before you and its history in the court and the arguments of the parties. You read the briefs filed by people who aren't parties. They're called friend of the court briefs, amicus briefs. You read those. But that's it. And the media really has nothing to do with it. They can be as outrageous as they want to be. It's not going to matter.
Okay, what was the best thing about being a Supreme Court justice, and what was the most challenging aspect of that job?
Well, the challenging thing is to try to cast your votes on granting cases and on deciding them in a way that when you are well informed about the principles of law and the precedents that you're trying to apply, and to feel that you've read everything you can and should read to enable you to cast a rational, defensible vote on the case before you. And it's challenging to do that. Sometimes you have vast amounts to read and never enough time to do as much as you'd like. But you just want to know everything you can so that the vote, when you cast it, is a meaningful one. And that you are satisfied, that you have done the proper thing as dictated by the precedents and by the law of this land. And it's such a privilege to be one of those votes. and to be at the court and privileged to decide some of these issues that matter to all of us, to you and to me, to all of us. You feel a sense of great responsibility, but also of great privilege to be in an institution that is respected by the nation, and the nation is willing to accept those decisions, even when they come down 5-4. The nation is willing to accept them and go forward. What a blessing it is for us to live in a country that has a system like that, and where we can have decisions decided thoughtfully very often by a Supreme Court and then go forward. I felt so privileged. You feel a huge responsibility, but also a sense of great privilege to be part of that process.
And our last question. You hear people in the news bemoaning the state of our country and our future. What is your view or your dream for America?
We're all right. Goodness. You know, we're a country where... Look around you here. You are at a wonderful university in a community that treasures this university. And you spend time here learning about how things are in what your area of interest is, and in coping with the issues all of us face. And we care about so much. We want clean air, and we want safe roads, and we want to go out on the street and feel like we're not going to be shot and killed, or that our house isn't going to be broken into. We want things to work well, and we still have the capacity to do that. You live in a community like that, right here in Texas. You've achieved that. And we're so lucky, and we can keep doing that. And we each have a voice in a forthcoming presidential election. That's amazing. It's going to be very tight. Remember to vote. Lots of people don't, you know. And one of the things you can do is encourage every citizen to exercise their franchise and not just sit down and sit on it. I don't know what you end up with in Texas, but I can tell you in Arizona, where I now vote, the number of registered voters who vote is low. I mean, it's just shocking to me, shocking. So we have to care, and we have to exercise our right to vote, and we have to work hard to make the community in which we live a safe, clean, decent place to live. And if we can do that, and if we can apply ourselves to earning a living, however we're going to do it, we're going to manage, and we're going to make this whole thing work. We've done it for a couple of 100 years already, and we can continue to do that. But we have to be educated, and we have to work hard. So do those two things. We're going to be all right.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in saying thank you. Sandra Day O'Connor, native Texan, mother, grandmother, spouse of beloved John O'Connor for 57 years.